All right, so we've defined power as the ability to usurp another person's will. We've talked about the sources of power, which include reinforcement, punishment, formal, expertise, and referent. We've talked about the social impact of power. The last thing we'll talk about is that the psychological perception of power is often more important than power per se. So I recently hit my tenure minimum for research. So I need to publish a certain number of journal articles in order to get tenure at Dominican. And I recently, like 6 months ago, hit that number. And I cannot tell you the just like seeing the letter that it was accepted for publication, it was literally like someone flipped a switch, and my confidence in my job immediately changed as soon as I got that letter. And so, for example, I started to become a lot more vocal in committee meetings about things that I was maybe unhappy about, or criticisms that I wanted to bring up, where I had been hesitant to bring those up before because I felt like I was in a position of less power. Now that I've reached my tenure requirement, I'm like, I have a position of authority. Now, no one in my committees knew my publication record. Like, none of them knew how close or far away I was from getting tenure, right? So nothing actually changed when I got that letter. The only thing that changed was my psychological perception of how much power I had. And we do this all the time, right? A lot. Oh man, if you've ever babysat a child, you know that most of the time you're bluffing. Like, you don't really have that much power over them, right? Because you can't you can't use corporal punishment. You can't hurt them. Like, ultimately, they can kind of do whatever they want, and there's not much you can do about it. And so you are bluffing with them most of the time when you tell them to do something, and that works sometimes, and then sometimes it doesn't. So we are often bluffing with the amount of power we have. When we're dealing with other people, we're often bluffing. They're often bluffing. And it's not always even bluffing, too. We're often under the impression. We've all been in situations where we felt really powerful, and then suddenly that was taken away in an instant, right? Where we had misperceived our position. So it's important to remember that the psychological perception of power is often more important than power per se. All right, today we have defined power as the ability to usurp another person's will. We've talked about the sources of power, which include reinforcement and punishment, formal, expertise, and referent. We've talked about how power has a strong social impact. And finally, we finished by talking about the fact that perception of power is often more important than power per se.